Go ahead and turn in your Bibles or your Bible app to John 11, but the passage will be up here on the screen. Sometimes the greatest gift a friend can give you is not words, but presence. No fixing, no explaining, just sitting next to you in your grief, maybe at the funeral, weeping when you weep. We tend to think of God as the one who will eventually make all things right, and he will in his timing. But we need to pause this morning to see the revelation of God in the face of Christ, because before God restores, he weeps. This is the part of the gospel that religion often skips over. The pause, the silence, the tears. Jesus didn't just come to raise Lazarus. He came to stand in the sorrow, to feel it, to grieve it. Jesus reveals to us a God who weeps. John 11, verse 28. After she said this, meaning Martha, she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. The teacher is here, she said, and is asking for you. When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" One of the greatest growth revelations of my personal faith journey in the past 10 years is the revelation. I was taught in Bible school to defend certain doctrines, and one of the things that we talked a lot about was the history of the doctrine of the deity of Christ and why that's so important, and the fact that Jesus is God. But one of the things that is undercommunicated is the revelation that goes both ways. It's not just that Jesus is God, it's that God is Christ-like. That is incredibly important for our ongoing trust and growth in the love of the Father. And this is so important that the writer of Hebrews says it very plainly, because Hebrews 1:3 reminds us the Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact imprint of his nature. The exact imprint of his nature. This means that if you want to know what God is like, you don't have to guess. You don't have to piece it together from fear or tradition or even from religion. All you have to do is look at Jesus, because Jesus shows us exactly what God is like. And what do we see here in this moment? Not distance, not detachment, not a cosmic fixer rushing to solve the problem. We see a God who weeps. We see a God whose holiness includes heartbreak. We see divine power wrapped in human tears. So if you've ever wondered where God is in your grief. If you've ever felt let down or left alone or that you prayed too late, then go and look here. Look to Jesus and know this is God. This is what God looks like with tears on his face and love in his eyes. So the scene opens up right where we left it off last week. We looked at the conversation with Martha, and now it's Mary's turn to go to the Lord. And when she does, notice that she says the exact same words that Martha said. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But this time, did you notice the posture is different? Mary falls at his feet. She collapses. This is not theology. This is agony. This is real. Grief has a way of leveling all of us. It takes our polished words and it breaks them down into rawness, earthiness. Sometimes we come to Jesus standing tall like Martha, but other times we fall at his feet just like Mary. And make no mistake, both are prayer. Both are faith. What Mary is modeling before us is surrender at Jesus' feet, and she's reminding us that this is not weakness, it's worship. The posture of Mary is broken-hearted faith, the offering of one's full being in grief, but also in trust, but most importantly, in honest presence. This is real lament, my friends. True lament is not a departure from faith. It is part of union with Christ. We talk about theosis, which means becoming a participant in the nature of God, about becoming one with God, walking in unity with God, not just theoretically, but in some mysterious, almost mystical reality. And what Mary is showing us here is theosis in grief. We're drawn into divine suffering and therefore drawn into divine communion. They go hand in hand. And Jesus sees her. He sees Mary weeping. And then he looks, and we're told he sees the whole crowd, and the crowd is also mourning. They're there mourning with Mary to help support her and to be a presence in her agony. And then what the text says is really powerful and really important for your ongoing and growing understanding of the nature of God. Because the text says that he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. I like the way we have to go slowly through this text, because when you read the heading of the chapter, we just want to get to the resurrection of Lazarus. But there are so many important details along the way. And the truth is, we will celebrate and rejoice actually next week in the part of the text where Lazarus is resurrected. But I actually think the most important part of the text is what happens before. Because this is real life, this is where we live, and this is where we need to see Jesus. Because this Greek word here is very, very strong. It is a word that implies intense, almost guttural emotion, agitation, outrage. It is a visceral reaction. And if I have a hard time thinking Jesus is showing up with a wink in his eye. I know something you all don't, but that's not what we see here. We see a human Jesus whose heart is broken. And here's what's really interesting about this story with Martha and Mary and Lazarus, because John goes out of his way to add the details to help us understand these aren't just disciples of Jesus, these were his friends. And so we see a God, and Jesus knows what's coming next. He knows what he's about to do, and yet it doesn't take away of the deep movement of spiritual empathy that he feels because his friends are grieving. When they grieve, he weeps. When you grieve, Jesus weeps. Jesus is not calm and detached. He's stirred up here. He's literally emotionally shaken. And this is a vital point. God is not indifferent. God is not removed from our pain. God feels, God responds, and God suffers with us. And this is what Jesus' grief reveals. He shows us a God who doesn't control all the outcomes, but who is present in all the suffering, working through love and relationship rather than through force. And this was a growth arc in my own journey because I thought God was just the cosmic fixer in the sky. And that this life was about figuring out the mystery of getting him to continue favorably do what I needed him to do to fix the messes that I got in. And it was a very transactional view of God. And it made God up there above the pain because he's the fixer. And I'm down here in the mess hoping he'll show up. And it was a warped understanding of the vision of God that's revealed in Scripture. He doesn't stand above my pain. He is right involved with me in the midst of it because he and I are one. We are not alone, my friends, in our emotional dysregulation. We are not alone in our collapse. We are not alone in our breakdowns because the incarnate one has entered the emotional chaos. God holds space for your sorrow. And that's what is revealed here. And then the crowd sees what's going on. They recognize how deeply Jesus is moved, and they begin to have opinions about it, as we all do. And I don't know about you, but I actually can kind of empathize with those opinions. But before we do, what is it they have this opinion about? Well, they have this opinion about what is in fact the shortest verse in the Bible. But at 52, I know there are some favorites. But at 52 years of age, battered by disappointments, shocked by unexpected consequences, trying to figure out how to be faithful, but be honest about how what my theological paradigm told me life was supposed to look like and feel like was completely inaccurate. I was very zealous and obnoxious when I was younger. And I find myself, believe it or not, wanting to grow more quiet in this season of my life. The most common answer that I give in my office, I don't know. And for me, in this season of my life, this verse is the most powerful revelation of God in that it has altered my understanding and expectation of what it means to walk with God. It's very simple. Verse 35, Jesus wept. These are not symbolic tears. This is not pretend sadness to make a point. In fact, it says that he wept. And in the Greek, this word implies a quiet, real, human sobbing. Think about that for a moment. Do you remember the last time you sobbed? Not just a few tears. Those come easy for me. We're rewatching All Creatures Great and Small. I think we ended season 3 where the son was born of our 2 romantic interests we've been following. And I tried to be quiet. My wife looks over and says, "Are you crying?" "Yes, I'm crying. The baby was born and he was at war, but he got home in time to see the new baby." Those come easy. I know I can count probably on 3 fingers the number of people that have seen me sob. But you know what that's like. It's the weeping that you cannot deny. It will be heard, it will be expressed. Oftentimes, maybe even into a pillow. Sometimes it's outside with my fist like this before I fall to my knees. But think about the last time you sobbed. That's what's happening here with Jesus. He is so moved. He is so much the incarnation of love and compassion. Even knowing who he is and the power and the miraculous thing that's about to happen, he is deeply and empathetically moved for love for his friends, and he begins to sob. This is not performance, my friends. This is divine vulnerability. And is not an attribute of God that I was brought up to celebrate and appreciate. And yet now in this season, it's so deeply meaningful. Power and compassion are not opposites. In fact, in Jesus, they're one. These tears are not signs of failure. They are signs of presence. We see here a God whose holiness includes heartbreak, a God who dignifies our tears by shedding his own. These tears allow us to drop our shame around grief. If Jesus weeps, then our weeping is also human and holy. I'm going through a bit of a renewal privately and personally. In fact, I did something that I swore I would never do again. I felt led to get another stinking Bible this week. And I bought a translation I never read before. And it's symbolic for me because I'm going to open up that Bible this afternoon. It just came in today. I drove in and yanked it out of the mailbox. It represents a version of me that's never read the scriptures before. Because I'm so thoroughly altered by God's mercy in expanding his view of who he is and his love and compassion. This guy that I am this morning has not opened up a Bible yet. In fact, I told a couple of people and they scratched their heads, look, this is my first Bible. That's how I feel about it. So I'm revisiting a few things, trying to look back at the spiritual history of those moments where God got my attention. Another one of those moments was in reading the book by Brennan Manning, The Ragamuffin Gospel. I don't know if you've read that before. I'm going through my 3rd or 4th reading of it. And just this morning, I read this quote: Jesus comes not for the super spiritual, but for the wobbly and the weak-kneed who know they don't have it all together. He offers us grace that is sufficient even when nothing else is. And that grace is the access point of that grace is often through the doorway of our tears. In the crowd, they say, see how he loved him? Others said, couldn't he have stopped this? And my friends, these are the same 2 voices we still hear. These are the same voices that echo and reverberate in my own heart. As I sat grieving, not just for the loss of my sister-in-law, but for the loss of for the grief my wife was experiencing in losing her sister, these questions were also present in my heart just a few weeks ago. I know he cares, but why didn't he act? I know that he cares, but why didn't he act? Why didn't he intervene? We live in the tension between presence and power, and Jesus does not resolve this tension with a sermon or a lesson. He holds it with silence and with tears. This, my friends, is divine restraint. It is not powerlessness. It's a refusal to override human freedom and suffering. God is working not above us, but within us and with us, moment by moment. In fact, as I said before, I think we can all empathize with the crowd saying, couldn't he have stopped this? Maybe you've wondered that too. Jesus could have come earlier, but he didn't. Because sometimes God doesn't prevent the pain. He joins us in the midst of it. He doesn't skip over sorrow. He inhabits it. Because the miracle is not just what happens after, but what happens within us and with us in the waiting and the weeping. These are necessary realities in order for us to grow into maturity. Before Jesus speaks the words, Lazarus, come out, he stops and he cries. This is the pause before the miracle. This is the shared silence before the healing happens. He doesn't just give resurrection, my friends. He feels the death. This is the God who joins us in our sorrow, not to fix us from afar, but to weep with us from within. I don't remember who said it. I think it was David Delgado who shared it with me, so I'm just going to quote it as if it were him. But this beautiful insight that we grow to understand as we walk with the Lord. I don't need a God who's in control of the events of my life. I just need a God who's at the center of it. I don't need a God who is controlling all the outcomes, but I need a God who is radically at the center of it, in the midst of it, walking with me in the emotional chaos. Because it is these false expectations that God is going to control and everything will turn out as we hope that does so much damage to our growth and to our souls and shatters our hearts in two. And so we have to take time together, maybe even to confess the collective trauma that that kind of thinking has done to us at one point or another. And then to step back and to realize maybe we've misunderstood the nature of how faith works in this life. But even through disappointment, it doesn't mean God isn't at work and God is not present in his power, and that there is a mystery that I'm called to trust. That there's not a Bible verse and a theology that explains all the heartache away. Sometimes we just don't know. Sometimes we sit in the ashes, and sometimes all that we can hope for is a friend who will sit in the ashes with us. And like the wisdom of Job at the end of that book, that magnificent work of wisdom literature with all the poetry and metaphor that we find in it, and the great revelation of that book with why do I suffer? Where are you, God? What is the reason for this? Is that beautiful revelation of the end on the words of Job. I have put my hand over my mouth. The greatest piece of literature wrestling with divine power and human suffering ends with, shh. Be quiet. You'll never comprehend it. You will never understand it. There is no easy answer to the question that you're asking. But there is a God who sits with you in the ash heap and weeps with you and restores you in his time. That is the hope we hold on to. This is the God that is revealed here in Jesus, the God who inhabits our grief and weeps with us as we weep. So today, if you're grieving, if you're uncertain, if you are aching, if you are in a place where you are wondering why God didn't come sooner, know this. And this is the only assurance that I can certainly give you. But I think it's enough. It's this: Jesus weeps with you. His tears are not a delay. They are, in fact, a sign of love. And my friends, resurrection is still coming. But Jesus meets us here at the bottom. He meets us in the grief. He meets us in the dust. And it is in that honesty that we are seen and we are loved. So if this text speaks wisdom to us in our journey, I think it may speak this: don't rush past your sorrow. Because even if you want to rush past your sorrow, God isn't rushing past it. Lament is not a lack of faith. It is the place where faith is refined. I believe this so deeply that if your journey has not brought you to a place where that visceral reaction of emotion, anger, disappointment, and weeping before God, you have yet to taste intimacy with Jesus. You cannot get there by pretending to be spiritual all the time. I know we require that you hear when you come to church, and we appreciate that. But maybe we can be a bunch of wobbly, weak-kneed ragamuffins that can create a community of safety for one another where you don't have to play that silly, phony game. And maybe if we create space to be real with one another, maybe we can learn to be that way before God. Now, it comes at a price. Transparency and vulnerability are not easy. There are plenty of Sundays where I drive away and think, oops, that was going a little too far. Look, I'm like black coffee and whiskey neat, acquired taste. I know that. I will openly confess, my friends, I am a walking mixture of contradictions. And I've tried a long time to either pretend like that wasn't so, or to project a version of me that hid that. And I'm done with that. I want to be completely who I am in all my fear and faith and contradiction and faithfulness and love and frustration, and walk with the God who is real by being real before the God with whom I walk. This is real. This is where real transformation takes place. Lament is not a lack of faith. It's where your faith is refined. So let Jesus sit with you in silence. Let him weep beside you, because before the miracle comes the pause. My friends, let yourself be held in it. Resurrection is not a bypass around pain. It's the way through it. So, let's practice together, shall we? You can shut your Bible app or close your Bible if you have a brick and mortar book, or ink and paper book, I guess I should say. Clear your lap. Just relax a little bit. When I do this, everyone knows, we're coming to the close. Everyone kind of gets this surge of energy. Me too. But relax for just a minute or two. I purposely try to end a few minutes early so we just create some space. Not for my words, but for the only one who's worth listening to. So let's create that space for a minute. Since we are Trinitarian Christians, let's begin with a trinity of breaths. real deep. And I want to hear you sigh that one, the exhale out. Just. I want to ask that you close your eyes for a moment. Imagine yourself sitting beside Jesus. The air is quiet, and the sorrow is real, and he is not talking. He is not fixing. He is simply there. And you, my friend, you are seen, and your sorrow is shared. Now, for the next few moments, practice this week's breath prayer. On the inhale, pray, you are with me. And on the exhale, simply pray, I am not alone. Let's practice that for just a few moments. You are with me as you breathe in. Exhale, I am not alone. You are with me. I am not alone. You are with me. I am not alone. Sit with that silence just for a moment or two more. This is what it is to be still with the God who weeps. Would you all stand with me? Worship team, you can go ahead and come up. As we begin to transition, we're going to engage in our last movement of worship this morning. We're going to take communion together. The prayer team will be up on each side of the stage because we want to pray for you for anything that you would like for us to. We're starting a new thing after service. We'll have a 15 or 20 minutes of a meet and greet just right across the hall over in the hospitality area. And if you're new or newish, or you've been here forever and we haven't talked in a while, please take a second and honor me with letting me hear from you. If I haven't met you, I would love to meet you. And so you're welcome to do that. Would you take your notes out and let's just take a moment to pray together before we take communion. Jesus, you could have come sooner. You could have fixed it. But instead, you came close. You cried. You shared the pain. Thank you for not skipping our sorrow. Thank you for meeting us in it. When we weep, remind us that we do not cry alone. When we wait, remind us that your love is not delayed. You are the resurrection and the life, and you are also the God who weeps. Let your tears become our healing. Let your presence be our peace. And let your weeping prepare the way for resurrection. If you're